The mysterious arrival. Jake Monroe had always thought his life was uneventful. Living alone on a quiet farm in the middle of nowhere, his days were spent tending to crops and fixing machines, while his nights were filled with the soft hum of insects and the occasional howl of coyotes. It was peaceful but lonely. That night, though, everything changed. It started with a streak of fire in the sky. Jake was fixing a loose fence post under the pale light of a full moon when he saw it, a blazing comet cutting through the darkness. But it wasn't like any meteor he had seen before. This one moved erratically, zigzagging across the sky, as if it were alive. Then, without warning, it plummeted into the woods bordering his property, disappearing in a fiery explosion. "What the hell was that?" Jake muttered, dropping his tools. He grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the woods. The thought of calling someone, maybe the sheriff, crossed his mind, but curiosity got the better of him. Besides, who else would believe him? As Jake approached the crash site, the smell of burnt wood and metal grew stronger. The trees were scorched, their blackened branches clawing at the night sky. In the center of the clearing, surrounded by smoldering debris, was a strange metallic object. It was sleek and oval-shaped, glowing faintly with a bluish light. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't a plane or a satellite. It was something else, something otherworldly. Then he saw her. A figure lay sprawled on the ground near the wreckage. At first, Jake thought it was a woman, but as he moved closer, he realized she wasn't quite human. Her skin had a faint silver sheen, and her long hair shimmered like liquid starlight. She wore a suit that seemed to pulse with energy, the material unlike anything Jake had ever seen. "Hey, are you okay?" Jake called out, cautiously stepping closer. The woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open. They weren't normal eyes. They were larger, glowing softly like two tiny moons. She looked at him, her expression dazed and confused, and spoke in a language Jake couldn't understand. The words were melodic, but completely alien. I don't understand you," Jake said, kneeling beside her. "Are you hurt?" The woman blinked, tilting her head as if she were processing his words. Then, to Jake's surprise, she touched a device on her wrist. A faint hum filled the air, and she spoke again, this time in broken English. "You save me," she said, her voice soft but urgent. "Danger coming. Must leave." "Danger? What kind of danger?" Jake asked, his voice rising. Before she could answer, a strange noise echoed through the woods. It was a low mechanical hum, growing louder by the second. Jake turned toward the sound, his flashlight catching the glint of something metallic moving through the trees. It was a drone, sleek, black, and ominous, with glowing red lights that scanned the area. "What is that thing?" Jake whispered, backing away. The woman struggled to her feet, grabbing Jake's arm for support. "No time. They find me. You help." Jake didn't know what was happening, but the fear in her glowing eyes was enough to convince him. "Come on," he said, helping her toward the edge of the clearing. "We'll head back to my truck." The drone let out a high-pitched whine, its lights locking onto them. Jake's instincts kicked in, and he pulled the woman into a sprint. Behind them, the drone fired a burst of energy that scorched the ground where they had just been standing. Jake didn't stop to look back. His heart thundered in his chest as he pushed through the dense underbrush, the woman clinging to his arm. They finally reached the truck parked at the edge of the woods. Jake threw open the passenger door and helped her inside before jumping into the driver's seat. The drone burst out of the trees, its lights blazing like angry eyes. "Hold on," Jake shouted, slamming his foot on the gas. The truck roared to life, skidding onto the dirt road as the drone pursued them. It fired another shot, narrowly missing the rear bumper. Jake swerved, gripping the wheel tightly. "What the hell is that thing? And why is it after you?" The woman didn't answer. Instead, she touched the device on her wrist again, and the truck's dashboard lit up with alien symbols. Jake's jaw dropped as the engine hummed with newfound power, the speedometer climbing higher than it should have been possible. "What did you just do?" he asked, glancing at her. "Help," she replied simply. "Must go far." Jake didn't argue. The truck barreled down the dirt road at impossible speeds, leaving the drone struggling to keep up. After several tense minutes, the hum of the drone faded into the distance. Jake finally slowed the truck, his hands trembling on the wheel. "What the hell is going on?" he asked, turning to face her. The woman looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude, and something else he couldn't quite place. "You? My chosen," she said softly. "Galactic husband." Jake stared at her, dumbfounded. "What?" Before he could process her words, the sky behind them lit up with more lights. More drones were on their way. "Drive," she urged, her voice steady but firm. "They not stop." Jake nodded, his pulse racing. Whatever he had gotten himself into, there was no turning back now. The chase begins. The night was still alive with tension as Jake's truck tore through the backroads. The roar of the engine echoed against the towering trees, the air thick with the scent of burned rubber and adrenaline. But the chase wasn't over, not even close. Above them, the night sky shimmered unnaturally, as if someone had spilled liquid silver across the stars. Jake glanced at Zaria, the strange woman who had crash-landed onto his property and turned his quiet life into a full-blown sci-fi nightmare. Her silvery skin gleamed faintly under the dashboard's glow, and her alien eyes were locked onto the rearview mirror. "They coming," Zaria said, her broken English sharper now, more urgent. Her fingers hovered over the alien device on her wrist, its lights flickering with alien symbols Jake couldn't even begin to understand. Jake's grip on the wheel tightened. "Who's they, and why are they after you? And while we're at it, why the hell did you call me your husband?" Zaria ignored the question, her focus snapping to the rearview mirror. A sharp, high-pitched whine pierced the air as another drone swooped into view. This one was larger than the first, with jagged wings and glowing red energy pulsing along its sleek body. "They want me," Zaria said, her voice softer now, almost regretful. "But now, they want you too." Jake's heart skipped a beat. "Fantastic," he muttered, slamming the gas pedal harder. "That's just what I needed." The drone dipped lower, its underside glowing ominously. Without warning, it fired a beam of red energy, narrowly missing the truck. The ground beside them exploded in a burst of dirt and sparks, rocking the vehicle violently. Jake fought to keep the truck on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I can't outrun that thing," he shouted, his voice breaking with frustration. "Turn here," Zaria barked, pointing toward a narrow path barely visible through the dense forest. "That's not a road," Jake protested, but it was too late. Zaria reached over and yanked the wheel, sending the truck careening off the main road and into the trees. Branches scraped against the sides of the vehicle like claws, the headlights casting eerie shadows across the forest. "Are you trying to kill us?" Jake snapped, his heart pounding. "No," Zaria replied calmly, adjusting her device. "Trying safe." Before Jake could respond, the dashboard lit up again with alien symbols. The truck's engine gave a strange hum, and suddenly, the vehicle seemed to handle the rough terrain effortlessly, gliding over rocks and roots as if it were on a smooth highway. Jake blinked in disbelief. "What did you do?" "Enhanced," Zaria said simply, as if that explained everything. Behind them, the drone was relentless, its jagged wings sliced through the trees like a predator stalking its prey. Another beam of energy tore through the forest, narrowly missing the truck but disintegrating a tree in its path. Jake swerved sharply to avoid the falling debris. "I really hope you've got a plan, lady." Zaria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she leaned out the passenger side window, her wrist device glowing brighter now. She muttered something in her native tongue, and suddenly, a shimmering barrier of light appeared behind the truck. The drone slammed into it at full speed, exploding in a fiery burst that lit up the forest like a second sunrise. Jake stared at the rearview mirror, his jaw hanging open. Did you just? Yes, Zaria interrupted, pulling herself back into the truck. She looked exhausted, her silvery skin dimming slightly. But more will come. Jake exhaled shakily, slowing the truck as they emerged from the woods onto an open field. The silence felt deafening after the chaos, but it didn't last long. Zaria leaned back in her seat, her glowing eyes fixed on the horizon. "We must leave Earth," she said softly. Jake laughed bitterly. "Leave Earth? Lady, I've barely left my hometown." Zaria turned to him, her expression unreadable but intense. "If stay, you die. They come for you now too. No choice." Jake looked at her, then back at the open road ahead. He could still hear the faint hum of more drones in the distance. For the first time in his life, he felt completely out of control. And yet, strangely, he also felt a spark of something else. Was it excitement? No, it had to be fear. "Fine," he muttered, gripping the wheel again. "Let's figure out how to get off this rock. But you better start explaining things, starting with why they're after you. And why you dragged me into this mess." Zaria hesitated, her gaze softening slightly. "Because," she said finally, "you are more important than you know." Jake frowned, glancing at her. "What does that mean?" Zaria didn't answer. Instead, she looked back toward the glowing horizon, where the faint shapes of more drones were beginning to appear. "Drive," she said simply. "We have little time." Jake clenched his jaw and slammed on the gas. He didn't know where they were going, but one thing was certain: his life would never be the same again. The Galactic claim. The truck's tires screeched to a halt at the edge of a vast, empty field under a sky that no longer looked like Earth's. The stars above shimmered unnaturally, shifting and swirling as though alive. Jake stumbled out of the truck, his legs shaky from the relentless chase. Zaria followed, her wrist device glowing faintly as she scanned the surroundings. "All right," Jake said, throwing up his hands. "We're in the middle of nowhere, being hunted by killer drones, and you still haven't explained what's going on. Start talking, lady, or alien, or whatever you are." Zaria glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "I am Zaria, daughter of the Orani High Council. And you, Jake Monroe, are now my bonded partner." Jake blinked, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "You're what?" Zaria stepped closer, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "In my galaxy, a bonded partner is a sacred alliance. It protects both parties under intergalactic law. By claiming you, I have ensured your survival. And mine." "Claimed me?" Jake echoed, his voice rising. "Lady, I didn't sign up for this. You can't just crash land on my farm, blow up my truck, and tell me I'm your galactic husband or whatever." Zaria tilted her head, her expression calm but firm. "You misunderstand. It is not marriage as humans see it. It is survival. Without this bond, I am vulnerable. And now so are you." Before Jake could argue further, the sky above them erupted in a flash of light. A massive ship, sleek and angular, descended silently, its hull gleaming like polished obsidian. Jake's heart sank as a ramp extended from the ship, and a group of humanoid figures emerged. They were tall, clad in armor that shimmered with dark energy, their faces obscured by sleek helmets. Zaria stepped in front of Jake, her posture tense. "Do not speak," she whispered. "Let me handle this." One of the armored figures stepped forward, its voice deep and metallic. "Zaria of Orani, you are hereby ordered to surrender. Your presence on this primitive planet is in violation of galactic treaty laws." Zaria squared her shoulders, her voice steady. "I am no longer under your jurisdiction. As of this cycle, I am bonded to a native of this planet. Under Galactic Accord 17, Section 12, my bond protects us both from detainment." The lead figure hesitated, its helmet tilting slightly toward Jake. "This human," it said, its tone dripping with disbelief. You bonded to him. Jake felt a surge of indignation. Hey, I'm standing right here. Zarya shot him a sharp glance, and he wisely shut his mouth. The armored figure seemed to consider this, then stepped back. The High Council will decide the legitimacy of your claim. Until then, you are both coming with us. Jake's stomach turned. Wait, what? I didn't agree to go anywhere. You will be unharmed, the figure said coldly. For now. Zarya turned to Jake, her voice soft but urgent. Trust me. Jake hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to run, but the look in Zarya's glowing eyes held him in place. Against every ounce of logic, he nodded. Fine, but you owe me some serious answers. The next thing he knew, they were aboard the alien ship. The interior was sleek and otherworldly, with walls that pulsed faintly as though alive. Jake tried to steady his breathing, but his nerves were on edge. He couldn't decide which was scarier, the armored guards, or the fact that Zarya seemed to know exactly what she was doing. As they were escorted into a large chamber, Jake's jaw dropped. The room was massive, filled with holographic displays of stars and planets. At the center stood a towering alien figure with elongated features and an air of authority. Its eyes glowed like molten gold, and its voice reverberated through the room. State your case, Zarya of Arani, it said. Why have you invoked the bonding accord with this primitive? Zarya stepped forward, her voice unwavering. This human is no primitive. He carries within him the genetic legacy of an ancient alliance between Earth and the Arani. By claiming him, I am reviving that bond and ensuring the safety of both our species. Jake's head spun. Genetic legacy. What are you talking about? Zarya turned to him, her expression softening. Humans are not as ordinary as you believe, Jake. Your ancestors were once part of the greater galactic community. That connection was severed long ago, but the truth remains in your DNA. The towering alien regarded Jake with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. If her claim is true, the bonding accord will stand. If not, both of you will face judgment. Jake swallowed hard. Judgment? What kind of judgment? The alien didn't answer. Instead, it gestured, and the room filled with a soft hum. A beam of light scanned Jake from head to toe, sending a strange tingling sensation through his body. The tension in the room was palpable as the scan completed. The towering alien's molten eyes widened slightly. Her claim is valid. Zarya exhaled, relief washing over her features. Jake, on the other hand, felt like he was on the verge of a meltdown. What does that even mean? He asked, his voice rising. What's happening to me? Zarya placed a hand on his arm, her touch surprisingly gentle. It means you're more important than you ever imagined. And now we both have a chance to survive. Jake looked at her, then at the aliens surrounding them. He didn't know what he'd just gotten himself into, but one thing was clear. His life as a simple farmer was over. The pursuers close in. The ship tore through the void of space, its engines humming with a rhythm that felt alive. Jake stood by one of the massive windows, staring at the endless expanse of stars. For a moment, the beauty of it all silenced the storm of questions in his mind. But the calm didn't last long. Jake, Zarya's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood behind him, her glowing eyes filled with a mixture of determination and worry. They've tracked us. Jake turned, his stomach sinking. What do you mean, they've tracked us? I thought this ship was supposed to be safe. It was, Zarya said, adjusting her wrist device. Symbols flashed across its surface, each one more alien than the last. But the Coalition has resources beyond what I anticipated. They'd locked onto our trail. Jake rubbed his temples. Of course they have, because nothing about this day is allowed to be normal. Before Zarya could respond, the ship's lights dimmed, and a warning alarm blared through the halls. A voice, smooth and robotic, echoed through the ship. Alert! Hostile vessels approaching. Intercept imminent. Jake's heart pounded. Hostile vessels. As in more of those drones. Zaria shook her head. Worse. Coalition interceptors, heavily armed and designed to capture or destroy. A shiver ran down Jake's spine. Well, that's just perfect. What's the plan? Zaria didn't answer immediately. Instead, she moved to the ship's console, her fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. The holographic display lit up, showing 3 sleek, menacing ships closing in fast. Their design was angular and predatory, like mechanical hawks ready to strike. They'll try to disable us first, Zaria said, her voice steady but tense. We need to outrun them. Jake raised an eyebrow. Outrun them? This isn't a sci-fi movie, Zaria. We're in a flying tin can. And those things look like they mean business. Zaria shot him a sharp glance. This tin can is equipped with Arani technology, far beyond anything the Coalition has seen. Trust me. Jake held up his hands. Fine. You're the expert. Just tell me what to do. The ship jolted violently as the first blast from the interceptors grazed its shields. Jake stumbled, catching himself on the edge of the console. You didn't say they'd start shooting this fast. They're impatient, Zaria muttered, her focus unwavering as she adjusted the ship's trajectory. Hold on. The ship accelerated, the stars outside streaking into lines of light. Jake felt the force of the speed press him into his seat, his breath hitching. The holographic display showed the interceptors struggling to keep up, but they weren't giving up. One of them fired again, the blast narrowly missing the rear of the ship. Do you have any weapons on this thing? Jake asked, gripping the armrests of his chair. Yes, Zaria said, her fingers flying over the controls. But using them will slow us down. We can't risk it. So, we're just going to run forever. Zaria glanced at him, a small smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. Not forever, just long enough. Long enough for what? She didn't answer. Instead, she activated another sequence on her wrist device, and a new hologram appeared in front of Jake. It showed a massive asteroid field, dense and chaotic, looming ahead of them. His stomach sank. Let me guess, Jake said, his voice tinged with dread. You're going to fly us through that thing. Zaria nodded. It's our best chance. The interceptors are fast, but not agile. If we make it through, they won't follow. Jake laughed nervously. You're insane. Perhaps, Zaria said, a faint smile on her lips. But I'm still alive. And so are you. Before Jake could argue, the ship plunged into the asteroid field. Massive rocks tumbled around them, some spinning wildly, others colliding with thunderous force. The ship weaved and twisted, narrowly avoiding collision after collision. Jake's heart was in his throat, every near miss making him grip his seat tighter. Behind them, the interceptors hesitated, their sleek forms struggling to navigate the chaotic terrain. One of them misjudged a turn and crashed into an asteroid, exploding in a fiery burst. Jake couldn't help but cheer. That's one down, he shouted, his excitement short-lived as another asteroid scraped against their hull, sending sparks flying. Don't celebrate yet, Zaria said, her voice strained as she focused on the controls. We're not out of this. Another blast rocked the ship as one of the remaining interceptors fired blindly into the field. The shot missed, but the shockwave sent smaller debris hurtling toward them. Zaria's hands flew over the console, activating the ship shields just in time to deflect the incoming barrage. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they emerged from the asteroid field. The interceptors didn't follow. Jake let out a shaky breath, slumping back in his seat. Is it over? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. For now, Zaria replied, leaning back in her chair. She looked exhausted, but a small smile played on her lips. You handled that well. Jake laughed bitterly. Handled it well. I'm one heartbeat away from a panic attack. Zaria's smile widened slightly. You're stronger than you think, Jake Monroe. That's why I chose you. Jake sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, Well, next time you want to choose someone, maybe give them a heads up first. Zaria chuckled softly. It was the first time Jake had heard her laugh, and despite everything, it made him feel a little calmer. But the calm was short-lived. On the holographic display, a new warning flashed. Unknown vessel approaching. The robotic voice announced. Jake groaned. Of course. Why would it be over? Zaria's expression hardened as she stared at the screen. It's not Coalition. Jake frowned. Then who is it? Zaria didn't answer, her glowing eyes narrowing. Something worse. Journey to the stars. The ship drifted in the silence of space, an endless ocean of stars stretching in every direction. Jake sat by the observation window, staring out at the vastness, his thoughts a swirling storm of confusion and disbelief. Earth was now a tiny dot behind him, and he felt as though he had stepped into someone else's life, a life filled with alien politics, high-speed chases, and impossible technology. You're quiet, Zaria said, her voice soft but tinged with curiosity. She stood a few feet away, her posture relaxed, but her glowing eyes watching him closely. Jake turned to her, his face a mixture of exhaustion and annoyance. What do you want me to say? That this is all normal. That I'm totally fine with being yanked into space by some galactic fugitive who called me her husband. Zaria's lips twitched in a faint smile. Fugitive? That's a harsh word. Jake raised an eyebrow. Am I wrong? She didn't answer immediately, instead walking over to the control panel. The holographic display shimmered to life, showing their ship's course through the galaxy. It was mesmerizing, but Jake couldn't shake the growing weight in his chest. Look, he said, breaking the silence. I don't know why you picked me, and I sure don't understand all this genetic legacy stuff. But you've got to start explaining things. What's out there? Why are they after you? And more importantly, why do I matter? Zaria turned to face him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Jake thought she might brush him off again, but then she gestured for him to sit by the console. He hesitated but complied, his curiosity outweighing his frustration. Your world, Zaria began, her voice steady, is not as isolated as you believe. Thousands of years ago, humanity was part of the greater galactic community. Earth was a vibrant, thriving hub of trade and knowledge, connected to dozens of other civilizations. Jake frowned. If that's true, then why don't we know about it? Why doesn't anyone on Earth remember? Zaria tapped a few controls, and the hologram shifted to display a map of Earth surrounded by glowing lines. Ancient trade routes, she explained. Something happened. A war, a catastrophe. The records are unclear. But Earth was cut off. Its people left to rebuild without the technology or knowledge of their past. Over time, those connections faded into myth. Jake leaned forward, his disbelief giving way to reluctant fascination. So, we were part of this big galactic network, like some kind of cosmic neighbors. Zaria nodded. Yes, and some of your ancestors carried traits, genetic markers, that made them unique. Those traits have been passed down through generations, hidden in plain sight. Jake snorted. And let me guess, I've got one of these magic genes or whatever. You do, Zaria said, her tone serious. It's why I bonded to you. The Coalition doesn't just want me. They want what's in your DNA. To them, you're not just a human. You're a key to unlocking ancient secrets. Jake leaned back, his head spinning. Great, so I'm not just a farmer anymore. Now I'm a walking science experiment. Zaria's expression softened. You're more than that, Jake. You're proof that Earth still has a place among the stars. Before Jake could respond, the ship's console emitted a sharp beep. Zaria's gaze snapped to the display, her demeanor instantly shifting to one of alertness. We're approaching the jump point, she said. Jake frowned. Jump point. Zaria's fingers moved deftly over the controls, and the hologram displayed a glowing rift in space. It pulsed with energy, like a swirling storm of light and darkness. It's a gateway, she explained. A shortcut through space. It will take us to Arani territory, my home. Jake stared at the rift, a mixture of awe and apprehension tightening his chest. That thing doesn't look safe. It's not, Zaria admitted, but it's our best chance to stay ahead of the coalition. As the ship drew closer to the jump point, Jake's nerves frayed. The swirling energy seemed alive, twisting and churning as though it might swallow them whole. He gripped the edge of his seat. Tell me this ship has some kind of seatbelt. Zaria chuckled softly. You'll be fine. Just hold on. The ship's engines roared as it approached the rift, the lights in the cabin flickering from the surge of energy. Jake felt a strange pressure in the air, as though the very fabric of reality was bending around them. Here we go, Zaria said, her voice steady but tinged with tension. The ship plunged into the rift, and the world around Jake exploded into a kaleidoscope of light and sound. Colors he couldn't name swirled past the windows, and his body felt weightless yet heavy all at once. He clenched his teeth, gripping the seat tighter as the sensation grew overwhelming. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. The ship emerged into a new stretch of space, the rift closing behind them. Jake let out a shaky breath, his pulse racing. That, he said, was the single weirdest thing I've ever experienced. Zaria smiled faintly. You'll get used to it. Jake groaned. I really hope I don't have to. Zaria's attention shifted back to the console, her expression growing serious again. We're not safe yet. The coalition will be close behind. But for now, we have time to regroup. Jake sighed, rubbing his temples. Regroup. Lady, I'm still trying to figure out what the hell is happening. You're surviving, Zaria said simply, and that's more than most would do in your place. Jake looked at her, then out at the unfamiliar stars beyond the window. He didn't know where this journey would take him, but one thing was clear. There was no turning back now. The Galactic trial. The Arani High Council chamber was nothing like Jake had imagined. He had pictured cold, metallic walls and rows of emotionless aliens in uniforms, glaring down at him with contempt. Instead, the chamber was a masterpiece of organic beauty. A vast, open space with walls that glowed softly like a living aurora. Streams of light wove through the air, forming ever-shifting patterns that seemed to hum with energy. Jake stood at the center of the room, feeling like an ant under a magnifying glass. Zaria was by his side, her expression calm but her posture rigid with tension. Around them, the High Council members floated in elegant, translucent pods. They were tall and otherworldly, their glowing forms resembling humanoid beings made of liquid starlight. Their eyes, if they could even be called eyes, were swirling orbs of light, constantly shifting in color. This is intimidating, Jake muttered under his breath, trying to keep his voice steady. Stay calm, Zaria whispered back. Speak only when spoken to. Great, Jake said, forcing a shaky smile. That's not stressful at all. One of the council members floated closer, their pod gliding silently. When they spoke, their voice was a harmonious blend of tones, as though multiple beings were speaking in perfect unison. Zaria of Arani, you have invoked the ancient bonding accord with an Earthborn. You understand the gravity of this claim. I do, Zaria replied, her voice steady and resolute. And I stand by it. The council members' glowing eyes shifted to Jake, who straightened awkwardly under their gaze. And you, human, do you understand the implications of this bond? Jake hesitated, glancing at Zaria for guidance. She gave him a small nod, and he cleared his throat. Honestly, no. But if it means staying alive, I'm all in. A ripple of light passed through the council chamber. A reaction Jake couldn't quite interpret. Was it amusement? Disapproval? He had no idea. The bonding accord is not merely a shield for survival, the council member said, their tone firm but not unkind. It is a sacred pact rooted in trust and unity. If your claim is found to be false, the consequences will be severe for both of you. Jake swallowed hard. Well, that's reassuring. Another council member floated forward, their voice softer but no less commanding. The truth of your bond will be tested. Step forward, human. Jake hesitated, looking at Zaria. She gave him a reassuring nod, her glowing eyes softer now. Go, she said quietly. I'll be here. Taking a deep breath, Jake stepped into the center of a glowing circle on the floor. The air around him shimmered, and he felt a strange warmth envelop his body. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was deeply unsettling, like being wrapped in sunlight without the heat. This is a truth weave, Zaria explained from behind him. It will read your intentions, your memories, and your connection to me. Jake's eyes widened. Wait, what? It's going to read my memories. Before anyone could respond, the circle beneath Jake flared to life, and a cascade of images filled the air. They were fragments of his life, childhood moments, lonely nights on the farm, the fiery crash that brought Zaria into his world. Each memory played out like a scene from a movie, vivid and raw. Then the images shifted. They showed Jake and Zaria together, her crash landing, their escape from the drones, the chase through the asteroid field. The moments weren't just visual. They were infused with emotion, fear, hope, confusion, and most surprisingly, a budding sense of trust. The council chamber fell silent as the memories faded, leaving only the shimmering circle of light. Jake felt exposed, as though every part of him had been laid bare. The lead council member spoke again, their voice softer now. The bond is genuine. It is fragile, but it exists. Jake exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Does that mean we're good? The council didn't answer immediately. Instead, they turned their attention to Zaria. Your choice to invoke the bonding accord was not without merit. However, there remains the matter of the coalition's pursuit. Their claim that you are a fugitive cannot be ignored. Zaria straightened, her voice unwavering. The coalition seeks to suppress the truth of Earth's past and its connection to the galaxy. By bonding with Jake, I have reignited that connection. The council members murmured among themselves, their glowing forms pulsing in rhythm. After a moment, the lead member spoke again. We will investigate the coalition's actions. For now, you are granted temporary asylum. But know this, the bond you share is now a beacon. It will attract both allies and enemies. Jake blinked. Beacon. That sounds bad. It is both a blessing and a burden. The council replied. Choose your path wisely. The lights in the chamber dimmed, signaling the end of the trial. Jake turned to Zaria, his expression a mixture of relief and apprehension. So, we survived that. What now? Zaria gave him a faint smile. Now we prepare. The real fight is just beginning. Jake sighed, glancing back at the council chamber as they exited. Of course it is. The final stand. The Arani starship drifted in orbit above a desolate planet, its hull gleaming against the faint light of a dying star. Inside the command deck, Jake stood at the observation window, staring at the ominous sight below. A coalition fleet, their jagged ships positioned like a pack of wolves circling wounded prey. His heart pounded as the reality of their situation sank in. They're not just here for you, Jake said, turning to Zaria. They're here for both of us. Zaria nodded, her face resolute but tense. They know what we represent now. The bond between us is more than a shield. It's a symbol. If we survive, it will inspire others. That's what they fear. Jake let out a humorless laugh. Great. So, no pressure. A holographic map flared to life beside them, displaying the coalition's fleet in sharp detail. The lead ship, larger and more menacing than the rest, pulsed with dark energy. Zaria pointed to it, her voice calm but firm. That's their flagship. Take it out, and the others will fall into disarray. Jake frowned, glancing at her. Take it out. With what exactly? A strongly worded letter. Zaria smirked, her glowing eyes briefly softening. We have a plan. Jake sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You always have a plan. I just wish one of them didn't involve us almost dying. Before Zeria could respond, the ship's alarm blared. The Coalition had detected their presence, and their fleet began to move. The flagship launched a wave of sleek, black fighters that streaked toward them like a swarm of angry hornets. "It's starting," Zeria said, her voice steady. She moved to the control console, her fingers flying over the interface. "Jake, get to the weapons station. I'll handle the shields." Jake hesitated, his nerves fraying. "Weapons? You trust me with that?" Zeria glanced at him, a faint smile on her lips. "You've handled everything else so far. Trust yourself." With a deep breath, Jake sprinted to the weapons station, his hands trembling as he activated the controls. The holographic display lit up, showing the incoming swarm. Jake's mind raced as he gripped the targeting system. "All right, Jake," he muttered to himself. "Time to find out if you've got a talent for space combat." The ship's automated systems locked onto the first wave of fighters, and Jake fired. Beams of searing energy shot out, cutting through the enemy ships with precision. Explosions lit up the void, but more fighters swarmed in, undeterred. "Nice shooting," Zeria said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "But don't get cocky. They'll adapt." Jake rolled his eyes. "Great pep talk. Really boosts morale." The ship shuddered as an enemy blast grazed the shields. Zeria adjusted the energy distribution, her focus unshakable. "We can't keep this up forever. We need to move." Jake glanced at the map, an idea forming in his mind. What if we lure them closer to the planet? Use the gravity well to our advantage. Zeria looked at him, a spark of approval in her glowing eyes. "Risky, but it could work. If you can keep the fighters off us long enough." Jake smirked, his confidence growing despite the odds. "Leave that to me." The ship banked hard, diving toward the planet's atmosphere. The Coalition fighters pursued, their formation tightening. Jake fired relentlessly, his instincts taking over as he anticipated their movements. Explosions filled the space behind them, but the flagship loomed closer, its weapons charging. "They're not falling for it," Jake said, sweat beading on his forehead. "They will," Zeria replied, her voice calm but firm. "Just hold them a little longer." As the ship skimmed the planet's atmosphere, the intense gravity began to pull at the pursuing fighters. Their sleek forms wavered, their pilots struggling to maintain control. One by one, the smaller ships veered off course, crashing into the planet's surface below. Jake let out a triumphant laugh. "It's working. They're breaking formation." Zeria didn't respond. Her focus was on the flagship, which continued its relentless pursuit. She tapped a command into the console, and the ship's core began to hum with an ominous energy. "What are you doing?" Jake asked, his voice rising with alarm. "Ending this," Zeria said, her tone final. "I'm activating the ship's quantum core. It will overload and create an energy wave strong enough to disable the flagship." Jake's heart sank. Disable or destroy? Zeria met his gaze, her glowing eyes filled with determination. "It's our only chance, but it's not without risk." Jake swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. "What kind of risk?" Zeria hesitated, then said softly, "The wave could destabilize the ship. We might not survive." Jake stared at her, a thousand thoughts racing through his mind. Finally, he nodded. "Do it." Zeria activated the core, and the ship's energy surged. The air around them crackled with power as the quantum wave built to a crescendo. Outside, the flagship's weapons locked onto them, ready to fire the killing blow. "Now," Zeria shouted. The wave erupted from the ship, a blinding pulse of energy that engulfed the flagship and the surrounding fighters. The Coalition's ships froze mid-flight, their systems fried by the overload. The flagship listed to one side, its weapons dimming. Jake held his breath as their ship shuddered violently, warning lights flashing across the console. "Zeria, hold on," she shouted, gripping the controls. The ship lurched, sparks flying as it stabilized. The warning lights faded, and the hum of the engines returned to normal. Jake exhaled shakily, slumping back in his seat. "We did it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Zaria turned to him, a small, tired smile on her lips. "We did." As the coalition fleet fell into chaos, the Orani ship pulled away, disappearing into the stars. Jake stared at the retreating battlefield, a strange sense of hope looming in his chest. "You know what," he said, turning to Zaria. "I think I'm starting to get the hang of this." Zaria laughed softly. "Good, because this is only the beginning."